The silence before thunder, the celebration, aboard the Calthrine Imperial Dreadnought unbroken. Will had reached its peak when the universe decided to teach Admiral Zorvax the difference between victory and survival. Another toast. Commander Velrix raised his drinking vessel, the bioluminescent fluid within casting green shadows across his scaled features. To the subjugation of the Epsilon Reach. To our inevitable dominance over the pathetic Trex Confederacy. Roars of approval echoed through the command deck. Zorvax allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, surveying the tactical display that showed the Calthrine Third Armada in perfect formation, 200 warships strong, the largest concentration of military power the Epsilon Reach had seen in 3 generations. The war zone stretched before them like a cosmic wound, a sector of space where 4 major powers had ground themselves bloody for 60 years. The Calthrine Empire, the Drex Confederacy, the Hive Collective, and the Vraxi Union, each claiming ancient rights to these resource-rich systems, each refusing to yield, each building their strength on the broken ships of their enemies. Today, Zorvax had delivered the Calthrine their most decisive victory yet. The Drex 7th Fleet lay in ruins behind them, nothing but expanding clouds of debris and frozen atmosphere. The Epsilon Reach would finally belong to the Empire. Admiral, the voice of his censor officer Krill, cut through the celebration like a blade. We're detecting anomalies at grid reference 7-7-Mark-4-9. Zorvax turned, irritation flickering across his features. Specify, Officer Krill. Are we tracking debris from the Drex vessels? Negative, sir. These readings are ... different. Krill's claws clicked nervously across his console. Multiple spatial distortions. Large scale. They appeared simultaneously across a 3 million kilometer front. The celebration died slowly, like a fire starved of oxygen. Zorvax moved to the sensor station, his ceremonial armor suddenly feeling heavy. Show me. The tactical display shifted, zooming out to encompass the entire system. At the edge of sensor range, dozens of red markers appeared, unknown contacts. Too many to count at first glance. Too organized to be natural phenomena. Could be a Hive Collective ambush, Velrix suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. They've been developing new jump technology. No. Krill's voice was barely a whisper. The energy signatures are wrong. They're not using any jump drive technology I recognize. It's as if they simply emerged from dark space itself. And Admiral, there's something else. Report. The formation is perfect. I mean perfectly symmetrical. Hundreds of ships, all appearing at exactly the same moment, all maintaining precise geometric spacing. That level of coordination is impossible, Zorvax finished. But even as he said it, a cold understanding was beginning to crystallize in his mind. There was only one species in galactic records capable of that kind of precision, that kind of technological sophistication. But they weren't supposed to be here. They weren't supposed to be anywhere. Get me visual confirmation, Zorvax ordered, his voice steady despite the ice spreading through his veins. All ships to combat readiness. Shields to maximum. Weapons. Visual contact established, Krill interrupted. The main view screen flickered to life. Zorvax had seen many warships in his 40 years of service. He'd faced the organic monstrosities of the Hive Collective, the crystalline behemoths of the Vraxi, the Baroque war palaces of the Drex. He thought he understood the vocabulary of military power, the language spoken by ships designed to kill. He understood nothing. The human fleet hung against, the stars like a promise of oblivion. Each ship was a study in lethal geometry, angular, efficient, devoid of the ornamental excesses that marked the vessels of older civilizations. They didn't look like warships. They looked like surgical instruments scaled up to planetary proportions. And there were so many of them. Count, Zorvax heard himself say. Give me a count. Still calculating, Admiral. Initial estimate, 800 vessels. No, correction 900. 950. Sir, they keep appearing. More are transitioning in every second. The bridge had gone silent. Every officer, every crew member, every warrior who had been celebrating victory moments ago now stood frozen, staring at the display. That's not possible, Velerix breathed. The restricted zones, the quarantine protocols. Humans aren't supposed to have a fleet. They aren't supposed to be capable of— Hail them, Zorvax interrupted. His mind was racing through 3 centuries of suppressed history, forbidden knowledge that every council species pretended didn't exist. The humans, the species that had appeared on the galactic stage like a wildfire, expanding, adapting, conquering with such ferocity that the entire council had united in fear. The species they'd driven back to their homeworld and locked behind barriers of law and interdiction, telling themselves it was containment when it might have been something else entirely. A cage. Or maybe just a delay. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Krill reported. Standard greetings, identification protocols, requests for parley. No response, Admiral. They're not acknowledging our transmission. Try again. All languages. All formats. Tell them we're willing to negotiate. Tell them, Admiral. Krill's voice cracked. They're moving. The tactical display showed the human fleet beginning a slow, inexorable advance. Not charging. Not rushing. Just moving forward with the patience of gravity itself, their formation never wavering, their spacing perfect. Battle stations. Zorvax barked. All ships, defensive sphere formation. Prepare to— Admiral, incoming transmission from the Drex remnant forces. Also the Hive Collective forward outposts. And the Vraxi border stations. They're all detecting the human fleet. They're all asking what's happening. They're— Krill paused. They're terrified, sir. Of course they were. Because everyone in this sector, everyone who studied the Forbidden's histories, knew the same truth. When humanity had first reached the stars, they'd fought 4 simultaneous wars against Council species and had been winning before the Council managed to unite against them. That had been 300 years ago, with primitive technology and a fraction of their current resources. What had they built in 3 centuries of isolation? What had they planned? What had they learned? Open channel to all Calthrine vessels, Zorvax ordered, forcing command authority into his voice. This is Admiral Zorvax. We are facing an unknown force of significant size. Do not, I repeat, do not fire unless fired upon. We will attempt diplomatic. Every sensor on the bridge screams simultaneously. Energy spikes across the entire human fleet. Krill shouted. Multiple weapon systems powering up. Simultaneous charge across all vessels. Admiral, they're preparing to— The human ships lit up. Not with the chaotic glow of conventional weapons charging. Not with the pulsing rhythm of plasma coils or the shimmer of particle accelerators. They lit up like stars being born, like pieces of the sun itself had been trapped in metal and were now being unleashed. Shields to maximum. All power to defensive systems. Evasive. But even as Zorvax gave the orders, he knew they were meaningless. He'd spent his entire life studying warfare, understanding the rhythms of battle, the dance of fleet combat. He recognized the patterns of attack, the telltale signs that preceded violence. This was different. The human fleet wasn't preparing to attack. The human fleet was the attack. Everything about them, their positioning, their silence, their terrible patient advance, wasn't a prelude to violence. It was violence itself, refined to its purest form. The last thing Admiral Zorvax saw, before the view screen went white, was the human fleet firing as one. A single coordinated strike from nearly 1,000 ships. Each weapon discharge timed to the microsecond. Each trajectory calculated to perfection. They didn't fire warning shots. They didn't demand surrender. They didn't explain, or negotiate, or threaten. They simply struck. And the Calthrine Third Armada learned what it meant to face a species that didn't just wage war. They erased it. Asterisk. The storm that erased stars. The unbroken will shattered dot. There was no other word for it. The pride of the Calthrine Imperial Navy, a dreadnought that had survived 40 major engagements, that carried shields capable of withstanding sustained bombardment from an entire fleet. It simply came apart under the first human salvo like paper in a hurricane. Zorvax found himself floating in the command deck, his restraints having failed when the artificial gravity cut out. Emergency lighting painted everything in shades of red. Around him, the bridge was a chaos of sparking conduits, floating debris, and the bodies of crew members who hadn't been strapped in when reality turned sideways. Report. He gasped, tasting blood. Damage report. Shields. Shields collapsed. Krill wheezed from his station, one arm hanging at an unnatural angle. Admiral, they collapsed in the first microsecond. The energy discharge was... I've never seen anything like it. They're not using plasma or particles. It's something else. Something that doesn't just impact matter, it negates it. Through the cracked view screen, Zorvax watched the battle unfold, though battle was a generous term for what was happening. The Calthrine Third Armada was dying, not fighting and losing, not retreating under fire, just dying. Human ships moved through their formations, like reapers through wheat. Each shot was precise, economical, perfect. No wasted energy. No missed targets. The humans weren't overwhelming them with superior numbers or firepower. They were simply operating at a level of efficiency that made conventional warfare obsolete. Communications. Zorvax pulled himself toward the com station. Get me the Drex forces. And the Hive. And the Vraxi. Everyone in this sector. Tell them. Already happening, Admiral. The communications officer reported, her voice shaking. The Drex Confederacy has deployed their 4th and 9th fleets. The Hive Collective is mobilizing 3 harvester swarms. The Vraxi Union is sending their Crystal Guard. Everyone's coming. Everyone sees the threat. For the first time in 60 years, the 4 powers of the Epsilon Reach had found common cause. The ancient enemies were uniting against a threat that made their petty territorial disputes look like children's games. It wouldn't matter. Zorvax watched through the view screen as the Drex 4th Fleet emerged from jump space, 300 vessels strong. Their commanders likely thinking the same thing he'd thought an hour ago. That numbers and firepower would be enough. The human fleet split out, not chaotically, not in panic or confusion. They split with mathematical precision, 200 ships peeling off to intercept the Drex reinforcements, while the remaining forces continued their systematic dismantling of the Calthrine Armada. The geometry of it was beautiful in a terrible way. Each human ship knew exactly where it needed to be, exactly what it needed to do, as if the entire fleet was a single organism with 1,000 bodies. How are they coordinating? Velrix pulled himself up beside Zorvax, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. That kind of fleet integration requires communication. But we're not detecting any transmissions. Nothing. It's like they're all reading from the same. They probably are. Zorvax said quietly, understanding crystallizing. Quantum entanglement communication. Instantaneous coordination across any distance. We theorized about it decades ago, but could never solve the stability problems. They solved it. Of course they solved it. The Drex 4th Fleet lasted 8 minutes. The Hive swarms arrived next. Organic vessels that could repair themselves, adapt to enemy weapons. Overwhelmed through sheer biological persistence. The humans adjusted their tactics without pause, switching to weapons that didn't just destroy matter, but seemed to disrupt biological processes at the molecular level. The hive swarms simply ... stopped. No explosions. No dramatic deaths. They just went inert, their organic systems collapsing simultaneously. 6 minutes. The Vraxi, Crystal Guard, arrived in a flash of refracted light. Their ships constructed from sentient crystalline matrices, they could absorb and redirect energy weapons. The humans switched again, deploying kinetic kill vehicles. Simple, inert masses accelerated to relativistic speeds. Physics doesn't care about energy absorption. When you hit something with the mass of a small moon, traveling at a significant fraction of LIGHTS PED. 4 minutes. They've been watching us, Zorvax said aloud. The realization crushing. All this time, behind their quarantine zone, they've been watching, studying every battle, every tactic, every technology we've developed. They've had 300 years to prepare for this exact scenario. Incoming transmission, the communications officer reported. It's Admiral, it's from the humans. Finally, communication, negotiation, a chance to play it. The voice that emerged from the speakers was calm, almost conversational. Human voices always sounded strange to Zarvax's ears, too smooth, too modulated, lacking the natural harmonics of properly evolved species. But this one carried an undercurrent of something that made his scales itch. Absolute certainty. This is Fleet Commander Sarah, Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force. To all combatants in the Epsilon Reach, your war is over. You have 48 hours to evacuate all military assets from this sector. Any armed vessel remaining after that deadline will be destroyed without warning. Civilian populations will not be harmed. Colony infrastructure will not be damaged. But your military presence here ends now. This is not a negotiation. Static. That's it. Velrix stared at the unit. No demands? No terms? No. Admiral, Krill interrupted, his voice oddly flat. You need to see this. The tactical display updated, showing the current disposition of forces in the Epsilon Reach. Or rather, what was left of them. The Calthrine Third Armada. 17 ships still functional out of 200. The Drex Fourth and Ninth Fleets. 46 ships. The Hive Swarms. Decimated. The Vraxi Crystal Guard. 12 capital ships remaining. Total engagement time, 27 minutes. The human fleet hung in perfect formation. Not a single ship out of position. Their earlier numerical advantage barely touched. They'd fought 4 major military powers simultaneously and had lost perhaps 3% of their forces. Get me a secure channel to Imperial Command, Zorvax said quietly. Emergency authorization. Omega-level priority. Admiral? Velrix looked at him with confusion. We need to regroup, coordinate with the other powers, plan a counterattack. There will be no counterattack, Commander. Zorvax met his officer's eyes. Look at the display. Really look at it. They didn't just defeat us. They barely slowed down. And do you know what the truly terrifying part is? What? They're still holding back. Those weapons, that coordination, that precision, this isn't their maximum capability. This is them being efficient. They're not trying to impress us or scare us. They're just removing an obstacle. The secured channel opened. Imperial Command receiving. Admiral Zorvax. Report. Command, this is Admiral Zorvax. The Third Armada has encountered a Terran military fleet in the Epsilon Reach. Current status. Combat ineffective. Casualties. Catastrophic. Recommendation ... He paused, the words bitter in his mouth. Recommendation. Immediate withdrawal from the sector. Possibly the entire frontier region. Maybe further. Silence on the other end. Then, Admiral, Are you suggesting we abandon territory to the humans? I'm suggesting we survive, Command. The humans didn't come here to conquer. They came here to remove us. There's a difference. A significant one. Explain. Zorvax pulled up the astrogation charts, overlaying them with the battle data. 3 days ago, we received reports of civilian vessels in this sector. Long-range colony ships, unarmed, just passing through. We ignored them because they weren't military assets. Command, I think those were human ships. I think there's a human colony somewhere in or near the Epsilon Reach. And I think we've been fighting our war right on top of it for years. Threatening it with our weapons, our debris, our chaos. You think they're protecting a colony? I think they're eliminating a threat to their people. And they don't care about our politics or our wars or our ancient claims. They've made their position clear. We leave or we cease to exist. And based on what I've witnessed today, that's not a threat. It's just a statement of capability. Asterisk another pause. Stand by, Admiral. Zorvax watched the human fleet on his display. They weren't pursuing the remnants of the 4 powers. They weren't securing territory or establishing positions. They were just ... waiting. Patient. Inevitable ... The cone crackled back to life. Admiral Zorvax, you are hereby ordered to withdraw all surviving vessels from the Epsilon Reach immediately. The Council is convening an emergency session. Initial reports from the Drex, Hive, and Vraxi indicate similar conclusions. The humans have issued an ultimatum. What's our response going to be, Command? We're going to withdraw, Admiral. All 4 powers are withdrawing. Because 300 years ago, we made a choice to contain humanity rather than destroy them, thinking we were being merciful. Now we understand. They were the ones showing mercy. They could have broken out any time they wanted. They chose to stay isolated. They chose to let us think we'd won. And now they've chosen to remind us what happens when we threaten what they protect. The transmission ended. Zorvax turned to his crew. All ships, prepare for emergency jump to Imperial space. Coordinate with the other powers' forces. We're leaving. Admiral, Velrix said quietly, what do we tell the Empire? How do we explain this defeat? Zorvax looked at the human fleet one. Last time, those perfect geometric formations. At terrible efficiency. At patient certainty. We tell them the truth, Commander. We tell them we encountered humanity, and we survived only because they allowed it. We tell them the Epsilon Reach belongs to the humans now, not through conquest, but through the simple fact that we cannot stop them from taking it. And most importantly, we tell them this. The humans didn't come to wage war. They came to end one. There's a profound difference. As the unbroken will limped toward jump space, its drives barely functional, Zorvax received one more transmission. Text only from Fleet Commander Chun. Thank you for your compliance. The civilian colony ship New Horizon and its 17,000 inhabitants appreciate your swift withdrawal. They have children aboard. You understand why we couldn't risk diplomatic delays. Return to your homeworlds. Tell your leaders that humanity wishes no conflict. But know this. We protect our own, always, without exception, without mercy. The message ended with coordinates, the location of the human colony, now revealed. It was less than 3 light years from the center of the Epsilon Reach war zone. For 60 years, 4 galactic powers had been fighting, dying, and destroying each other within easy reach of human civilians. And humanity had watched, had studied, had prepared. Had waited for the moment when patience ended and action became necessary. Zorvax laughed. A sound edged with hysteria and dark understanding. The Calthrine Empire had celebrated victory today. They'd thought themselves conquerors, apex predators in a galaxy of lesser species. Then humanity had arrived and taught them what it truly meant to be prey. as the unbroken will jumped to safety. The Epsilon Reach fell silent for the first time in 6 decades. The war zone that had defined a generation, that had consumed countless lives and resources, simply ended. Not through negotiation, not through exhaustion, not through peace treaties or diplomatic accords. It ended because humanity said it would. And in boardrooms and war colleges and strategy chambers across 4 major galactic powers, military, commanders and political leaders began the uncomfortable process of updating their threat assessments, their contingency plans, their fundamental understanding of the galactic order. The humans were back, and this time there would be no containment, no quarantine, no comfortable delusion that they were anything less than what they'd always been, the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. But perhaps, if the other species were wise, if they learned from what happened in the Epsilon Reach, there might be something else. Coexistence, on humanity's terms. Asterisk.